Japan is a land of many traditions, old and new, a country of many faces, modern technological success, and a distinctive cultural heritage. Tokyo is the living example of Japan as a modern economic miracle, and yet visible to the west of Tokyo is Mount Fuji, an exquisitely shaped mountain whose beauty is appreciated not only in Japan, but also throughout the world. Fuji is much more than just a beautiful mountain. It is also one of the most important symbols of Japanese identity, both in art and in religion. Fuji is praised as a divine mountain in the 8th century Japanese poetic anthology. Later, Fuji became one of the most popular themes in Japanese art. But most of all, Fuji is a sacred mountain. There are many sacred mountains in Japan honored in their own right as holy places, as well as being the dwelling place of kami, the native Japanese deities, and also as the home of Buddhist divinities. From medieval times, Fuji became one of the most important of all Japanese sacred mountains, and ordinary people, townsmen and farmers, went on religious pilgrimages to Fuji. Now, pilgrims are greatly outnumbered by recreational climbers, and today's pilgrims use modern conveniences of transportation. But some groups still make annual trips to Fuji as a religious pilgrimage. The earliest religion in Japan emphasized the worship of Shinto deities, who are seen in the beneficial and awesome aspects of nature, in water and in rice, as well as in huge trees, boulders, mountains, and even in volcanoes. Buddhism entered Japan about the 6th century, and Buddhist divinities soon came to be associated with Japanese sacred places. In ancient times, Fuji was viewed as a sacred mountain and the dwelling place of Shinto deities, and later came to be seen as the favored site of Buddhist divinities. Throughout Japanese history, both Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples have been found on Mount Fuji. In ancient times, great religious leaders set the precedent of climbing Fuji as an act of religious devotion and asceticism. In early medieval times, many people came to climb Fuji, and since late medieval times, these people were organized into pilgrimage associations. Hundreds of independent pilgrimage groups were located in the area around Tokyo. Fuji is snow-covered most of the year, which limits the regular climbing season to the 2 summer months of July and August. The pilgrimage groups make their sacred journeys to Fuji each summer. In other months, they meet in homes and hold worship services. The sacred shape of the mountain is reproduced in the small replicas of Fuji, which form the altar pieces of these groups. Most of the hundreds of pilgrimage associations have disappeared, as have many other Japanese folk customs, casualties of the rapid expansion of industry and commerce, and the weakening of local neighborhood ties. But a few groups continue some of the old practices. Each year, several 100,000 people, including some foreigners, climb Fuji, most of them for fun or recreational experience. However, in Japan, mountain climbing developed as a sport only within the last 100 years. Before that time, mountains were viewed as sacred, and the climbing season at most mountains was marked by rituals formally opening the mountain. These rituals were carried out for Fuji at the end of June, both at a number of shrines around the base of the mountain, and also at miniature Fujis many miles away in the Tokyo area. These rituals open the sacred mountain to pilgrims and sanctify their journey. Now, tourists and recreational climbers visit Fuji whenever the weather and roads make it possible, but pilgrims climb Fuji only during the season determined by the ritual opening and closing of the mountain. We will travel to Fuji with 2 of these pilgrimage groups. The pilgrims who climb Fuji as a religious practice take care to prepare themselves for their ascent. Throughout the year, between the annual summer pilgrimages, they keep alive their devotion to Fuji and its divinities by attending monthly meetings and worshipping together, reciting their liturgy praising these deities. Before the group sets off for Fuji, a special ceremony is held. Not all members of the Pilgrimage Association climb the mountain every year, but as many as possible gather to join in the ritual asking for the blessing of the climbers. The clothes and packs of the people going on the pilgrimage are passed through fire for blessing and protection. The pattern of religious practices of Fuji pilgrims owes much to the Shugendo, or Yamabushi practitioners, who pioneered religious devotions in the Japanese mountains. The fire ceremony of pilgrimage associations is one example of this Yamabushi influence. Another example is the special clothing of pilgrims, which is modeled after Yamabushi dress, suited for protection of the body in the mountains. Also, such Buddhist articles as rosaries and bells are used by some pilgrims. Traditionally, pilgrimage associations collected monthly dues and used some of the money to send several of its members on the summer Fuji pilgrimage. These pilgrims spent several weeks walking from Tokyo to Fuji and back. Now, Fuji pilgrim associations usually charter buses and go from Tokyo to Fuji in a few hours. This is the Miyamoto Pilgrimage Association gathering to board a charter bus in front of the pilgrimage leader's residence. He owns a luxury apartment building and lives on the 5th floor, where he has the meeting room for the pilgrimage group. Because of his love of Fuji and lifelong commitment to Fuji pilgrimages, he named his apartment building Fuji Mansion and has attached a plaque of Fuji to the front of the building. Of the 30 who went on pilgrimage in August 1988, a third were members of the Fuji Pilgrimage Association. 2/3 were not members. In traditional times, pilgrims made their way to the foot of Fuji, where they lodged in special inns. The head of the inn was a guide who led the pilgrims to the mountain. Some of these inns still survive, and the Miyamoto Pilgrimage Group has maintained its ties to this inn. These days, the inns serve only as lodging places, and the pilgrims find their own way to the mountain. They leave some of their belongings at this inn, because after climbing Fuji, they will come back to the inn to spend a night. They reboard their charter bus to take a special highway to a point halfway up the mountain. The climbing path up Fuji is divided into 10 stages or stations. The new bus route takes people around the first 4 stations and deposits them at the 5th station. This is the highest point on the mountain for public transportation. Horses can be ridden part of the way to the peak, but pilgrims usually walk from the 5th station to the summit. Fuji is a very popular tourist attraction, and tourists outnumber pilgrims in the crowd around the hotels and souvenir shops at the 5th station. The motives for climbing Fuji are as varied as the clothing of the people who climb it. Most go for some form of recreation, for fun, to get away from the city, to enjoy nature and the scenery, and for the exercise and sport. Some wear casual clothing, others quite elaborate and expensive mountain climbing gear. The pilgrims, too, may share some of the same motives and clothing as the recreational tourists. But pilgrims are set apart by their religious motivation and at least a badge or emblem identifying them as a member of pilgrimage group. For the pilgrims, climbing Fuji may be enjoyable and pleasant, but it also means to come into contact with the kami and Buddhas, and to purify themselves. These pilgrims usually chant the Buddhist phrase Rokkon Shoujo, purification of the 6 senses, as they proceed up the mountain, voicing their effort to purify or improve their physical and mental condition, the purpose of their pilgrimage. For For both tourists and pilgrims, the route and time of the trip is basically the same. Although it is possible to climb and descend the mountain in the same day, the favored plan is to leave the fifth station by noon, climb until early evening, and stop for a while in a mountain hut at the seventh or eighth station. There, the climbers eat a light meal and sleep for a few hours, rising shortly after midnight to make the final ascent in the early morning hours, arriving at the summit before daybreak at about 4:30 to greet the rising sun. Mount Fuji is a gradual slope and no special mountain climbing tools are required, but the weather is so unpredictable that a successful ascent is never assured. Every year there are injuries or death from falling rocks, and rain or wind may be so severe that a climb is too dangerous. In July 1988, the Miyamoto Pilgrimage Association reached the 8th station safely and spent the night there. But the next morning the wind was so strong that safety officers prohibited anyone from advancing up the mountain. Because the charter bus would be waiting for the group later that day, the Miyamoto Pilgrimage Association could not wait for the weather to clear and had to descend from the 8th to 5th station and return to their inn at the foot of the mountain. But we can continue the climb to the summit with another religious group, Maruyama Kyo, which was fortunate enough to have good weather on its ascent in early August 1988. Maruyama Kyo is a religious movement founded in the 18th century by a man who was a member of a traditional Fuji pilgrimage association. He developed his religion around the ideals of sincerity and devotion he learned in a traditional Fuji pilgrimage association. Every year, the leader of Maruyama Kyo, a descendant of the founder, leads some members of Maruyama Kyo on a pilgrimage up Mount Fuji. Maruyama Kyo has its own distinctive dress and practices, and while climbing recites its own favorite phrase, Tenmei Kaiten, signifying the effort to follow the founder and improve their personal lives. The Maruyama Kyo group makes its way to the mountain hut between the 7th and 8th station where it spends the night.